What's up guys, it's Dan at All for Speed. Welcome back to the channel. I've got a clip here that I'm gonna give you guys for the part 3 of the Malibu suspension. It's actually been a handful of years, but I did have the video content cataloged and I wasn't sure if I was gonna put it up because there were certain parts that I didn't feel were really informative. But you know what, for you guys, I'm gonna go ahead and drop this for you. Hope you guys enjoy the video, hope you learned something, hope it helps. And be sure to drop a comment, like, and subscribe. Enjoy the video. Good luck on your builds.
What I'm going to do on this video actually is I'm going to remove this brace here. So this goes from the front of the lower control arm up to the frame, and then through here is the bolt for the upper control arms. So instead of installing the upper control arms, it makes sense just to replace this bracket while everything is disassembled. So I'm going to go ahead and do this bracket. You may not be doing this, so you can skip through this part, but if you're doing this support brace and the control arms like I am, you might as well do it now. Just go ahead and remove this, and then we'll remove this one too. Alright, for the rear brace, rear lower control arm brace, it braces the frame. We have 9/16 head in here. Again, I'm using this stainless bolt kit, so it's 9/16 head on one side, 3/4 nut on the other. On this side, I used a impact gun, was able to get that off with a 9/16, and then I have this rear brace here now dropped off. I'll push this bolt in and hopefully not lose it in the frame. I gotta remember exactly how I got that in there in the first place. Probably through here. And then I'll drop this control arm here and here, and I'll support the rear end. That will allow this rear end kind of on this side to really rotate around, and I think at that point is when I'll remove this spring. So to remove the springs, you can see they're already loose, and I'll just be able to push down on it enough to get the spring over. I may even need to do it after I start loosening up some stuff on that end. Now I've covered the upper control arm, installing the Roto-Joint. Installing the control arm should be really easy, just to reverse the other bolt that holds the support or the brace there, and then when I pull that out, I'm already halfway done with this control arm, and then this one will be the last piece, and that'll cover the upper and lower control arms and the brace. So a little trick I did is I used that long bolt head bolt again to push through one side, while I use the impact gun to loosen this one out, and it just kind of threaded its way out. Alright, so in trying to figure out which side each of these goes on to, because they do kind of both fit the fitment of the brace, and I'll show you that in a second. I thought I could use the sticker, but the sticker doesn't even face the right way up on this side. But basically what you want to follow is the bend in this bar, and then the adjuster. The adjuster is going to be closer to the front of the car. This is going to mount out up closer to the top of your rear end. Now, when I say follow this bend, basically when you put this in place, that bend is going to follow the tub of the body of the car. So the body of the car does come down and curve, and you want the bend in that brace to follow the curve and curve around, not interfere or make contact. I don't even think you can install it wrong because it'll make contact on the body, but in case you can fit it in there, just remember you want that to bend away from the body. Okay, so now we have the rear upper control arms matched up. We've turned these out until they line up. I have bolts going through. I could run a longer one through here, but no need. And a bolt running through there just to make sure that they're pretty much on spot. I've got the rear brace lined up, turned this out as well, ran the bolt through just to make sure we're pretty aligned, and then I tightened this by hand in case I need to again adjust it later on install, and these are now matched up. I have the rear lower control arms matched up with a bolt. They're not adjustable, but I did want to make sure that they're going to line up, that I got the right part, and everything looks good here. So I do have all the right pieces at the right adjustments now to install. Alright, what you want to do for the lower control arms is install the long bolts. These braces, frame braces, will come with 4 long bolts. These are because they have longer sleeves here that they need to pass through, and through the bushing for the control arm. Same thing up here, it's going to pass through here and the upper control arm bushing. So these 4 will be used on each side of these 2 braces, and let me show you how that's done. So this is going to be the bolt you want to install first, and you want to just get it started. Everything's really loose still. We'll torque everything down at the end. We want it loose so that we have movement to be able to adjust it how we need. The reason I didn't install this one yet is because we will need to kind of finesse the rear end. So we'll have to wiggle it around and shift things around to get these to line up exactly how we want. So for ease, I wanted this first. Now we'll swing this up into place. And actually we might want to put that, actually put that up there first, because you can't swing that. So you can't swing this, so don't do like me. You want to start this one first up top with the with this side of the upper arm. So you want the upper arm connected first with the brace. Then from there we'll put the lower control arm, and then we'll work our way back to this control arm in that order. What we've removed is this bolt. We don't actually want to put this lower control arm bolt in yet. So we have the lower control arm free. The upper control arm is still free. It's not connected to the housing. The reason is so that we can actually maneuver this and pull this spring out. So we're gonna have that. Here we go. We can pull down on the spring and it'll come off of that bushing there. Are you able to pull it down some more? Pull it in. Press it in this way. You're pulling it out, right?
I just don't know which way to
push it this way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We have a pry bar up here. We're gonna pry on it just to compress it, and then that we'll either compress it from the top or we'll compress it from the bottom and slide it off of this collar or out from under that collar and that cup. All right, so we got this bolt in. It does take some kind of prying a little bit here and there to get this to line up. We got this side through, and then the other side was a little bit more difficult. We got that lined up. We do have the bolt started on the front. We have the bolt started on the reinforcement brace. And then on the top, what we had to do is actually put the jack toward the rear. So that way it adjusts the pinion down and forward. We measured between these 2 bolts to make sure it was exactly 10 1/8 like the control arms we took off, because we already had our pinion angle set up. So now that we know that this is the same measurement here, we jacked up the rear end and it helped us line that bolt up. So we got one side and we're going to work on the other side, and then that'll complete all 3 of those components for this side. We'll tighten them down and go from there. All right, with these control arms all started and the spring out, we're going to go over to the shock. This is going to be a half inch bolt on this side, or nut on this side, and a 1/2 inch bolt on the other side. Once we get this off, we can get the coilover on, and then we'll basically do everything we did on this side to the other side. We are also installing a shock tower brace, so we'll show you what that fitment looks like as well. All right, we got the shock out. It's a 3/4 nut on this side for this shock and 11/16 on this side. So now that that's out, we can start fitting in the shock tower brace. So we did actually end up taking this shock out on the other side first. We wanted to make sure we have both shocks out so that when we put the brace up there, we could feed the bolts through the top side on both sides. We spent quite a bit of effort getting this bolt through, and now we've come to the part of installing the coilover brackets from UMI, and that will have to go through that hole. So we gotta now take that out and redo it. All right, so just showing you how this goes. If you try to lift this arm up in here, you're gonna have a pretty difficult time between these two spacers here. So what you wanna do is tilt this down so that we're coming through this wider section. So we'll tilt that down, bring it up, like so. And then we'll start the bolt through the control arm here, all the way through the bracket and through the other side. They provide a bolt that goes through the control arm. There's a couple extra bolts which I think go down through here for some other sort of attachment. I'll have to see what it is. Or maybe just a control arm adjustment or a ladder bar, I don't know. Or adjustable control arms maybe allow you to go into these applications. But we did get the bracket on and it looks pretty solid. So we'll get the coilover assembled and then we'll mount those here. So we had a race, he's still going. Not like he had to wait for me to finish using those pliers or anything. But we did get the shocks, the coilovers put together, so I'm gonna tell you exactly how they go real quick. Basically, you have a washer, so you want the bevel side of the lock nut down so that this side is flat, up against the flat surface of this shock nut, spring nut. So lock nut, spring nut, washer, the bearing, if you have the bearing kit, another washer, then the shock itself, spring, and then I did put another washer because there's an extra one when you get the bearing kit. I put one on top, and then the cap, and then you just kind of tighten it all just enough to touch, and then we'll fit it on the car before we make final adjustments. So this is now complete setup. Now on the ends you have these bushings that like Roto-Joints. For those you do have to put these C-clips in, one on each side, top and bottom, and we'll use these kind of pliers. You can adjust them, you could just put different tips on them, but essentially you'll just put them like that. Once you pinch them, just put them in there, make sure they sit tight, push on them, you'll hear them click in, and then everything is ready to go for installation. Alright, so we did end up putting these through in the top, and then the there's C-clips that go here. So you have two C-clips holding the races in there, the Roto-Joints. Then you slide this mounting rod through, clip those. So on the inside you're actually spreading, you're compressing the C-clip. On the outside, these ones you're actually spreading the C-clip to put it to use to install it. Down here you're going to install this sleeve, the brass sleeves that come with the kit. At the top you don't need a sleeve, and then your UMI supplied bolt will go through there. Alright, this is what one side looks like mocked up. So everything's in, nothing's torqued down yet, but we have the coilover mounted. This is how the bracket mounts. Coilovers mounted, lower control arm, brace, upper control arm, Roto-Joint, and the last piece is that shock tower brace. So the way everything installs at the top, the nut goes in the top. That's how I did it. You can fit it in there. There's enough clearance, and then you put the C spacer. Looks like this. And then the last piece is the lock washer and the nut. So it goes bolt, washer on top, and then the spacer, washer, spacer, lock washer, and nut on the bottom. And we'll tighten that up too. And now we just have to do the same thing on the other side. In order to install the bolts and hardware that came with the UMI components, it is a longer bolt, and the reason is because it has to go through the shock tower brace up top with a washer up top, and then the T-bar or the crossbar for the top of the coilover, and then the C-shaped spacer, then your lock washer and nut on this side. So those long bolts are what you do want to use, and they are a little bit thicker. So I did use a step bit to get this out to 7/16 is what seemed like exactly right. And so they fit exactly through those holes. You will need to drill these out probably. Okay, so we have the entire left side completely installed, and now we are working through the right side. Basically, when you install this, you have to install the upper control arm closest to the front of the car first with the reinforcement bar. Once that is installed and just the nut on just enough to hold it together, then you can swing this side up and bolt through the control arm, the lower control arm, toward the front of the car. So now you have this, these two connections. You want to leave this upper control arm loose, and you want to come over and swing the lower control arm up with the bracket. So in order, this would be joint 1, joint 2, joint 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This would be the last part installed, going in order from an entire side. At the top of the coilover, you want to make sure that you install the spacer plate first, this reinforcement spacer, then the T-bar. Let's not let that fall. Then the T-bar, lock washer, washer, lock washer, and nut. On the lower side, it's gonna be a bolt in your washers. So I'm showing you the passenger side rear coilover and how I installed it. On the shock tower brace, I put the bolt and then a washer through the top side. On the bottom, you want this spacer, reinforcement spacer here. You want that in between the T-bar and the chassis. And then you have the T-bar for the shock. And then I put a washer, lock washer, and a nut. I did throw some anti-seize on here. I'm putting it on all of the nuts and bolts for the rear suspension. I'm not sure if that's what it's called for, but I think it makes sense so that nothing back here rusts or seizes up. And you will be wanting to make adjustments a lot on the rear, probably, so I think for suspension that makes sense. I've left this loose for now, so that way I can move the shock over out of the way, just by sliding this back up and then sliding the shock out of the way. That gives me better access to the bolts. These will be tightened to 35 foot-pounds, and the lower will be tightened to 60 foot-pounds. So this will be the first part of the rear suspension that we torque down. We could probably torque down the adapter plates here, and then you want to torque down all the rest of the joints after the car is back on the ground with load on it, and a lot of this will go to 90 foot-pounds. Alright, so I had to correct to this side, and what you gotta do to access these bolts a little bit easier is slide the coil nuts all the way to the bottom, so that what you can do is pull the spring down, and then you can actually shift it over through the slot in the top and move it out of the way so you can get direct access. In order to do this, and you also want the car suspension completely drooped, so the car frame is on jack stands but the rear end is drooping down. Now I had this plate here backwards. I had it on the bottom side of the shock, but we really want it on top and then the shock on the bottom. So I've now corrected that. The other piece here is I have the bolt and the washer on top and the lock nut and nut here, what they're gonna call for is 25 foot-pounds on this brace, but then the shock instructions call for 35. So I'm probably gonna go to the 35 foot-pounds of torque to tighten these down. But you want to make sure that you have the shock below that bracket. It was kind of tough to get those nuts on. You have to decompress the shock to be able to slide it over, and then once you drop the nuts in, you have to extend the shock so that it stays up high, and you have to extend it right onto those bolts. You'll see what I mean when you're trying to get the bolts through the hole in the shock over under it and everything to line up so you can actually have enough thread sticking out to get the washer on and then the nut. But I'm gonna go ahead and torque those down now that I have that all lined up properly. All right, we have the top of the coilovers torqued down to 35 foot-pounds now. Now we're gonna go ahead and torque these down to 60 foot-pounds. Just a quick note on the top ones, we did have to get a box and wrench on the very top side, and then we used the torque wrench on the bottom side. So it's pretty tight fit up there, but it, you know, with some time you can get it. I did it alone, but it would be nice if you had somebody to hold the wrench because it keeps falling down on your face, but you can make it happen. All right, so we have the lower coilover bolt torqued down to 60 foot-pounds, and we've got the upper torqued down to 35. The instructions for the shocks call for 35, or for the coilovers call for 35, but for the strut brace or the shock brace calls for 25. I went with 35. What you have on top is the bolt, the washer, the shock brace, then the frame, then the spacer or plate, then another washer, lock washer, and the nut is what I did. So these are at 35 now, all torqued down. Now what we're gonna do, I'm not gonna adjust the brakes just yet, so I'll move them out of the way, but I'm gonna mount the wheels in the back. And what I'm gonna do is set everything down on the ground. The frame braces we're gonna torque down to 90. Then we're gonna torque down the nuts, the adjuster nuts, and then on everything else it should be about 80 foot-pounds. So here on the upper and lower control arms, both points would be 80. So I'm gonna let the car down after I get the wheels mounted and go there. All right, so we have the brakes still unmounted because we're gonna adjust those last, but we got some wheels mounted. What we're trying to do next is we're gonna actually get the sway bar started in. That way it's in place, and then we'll move forward and go through all the torque specs of all the suspension with it down on the ground, fully loaded. All right, so I did get the bolts in. I decided to put them in through this direction where the nuts are on the inside, so that the studs stick out under the car instead of, you know, causing possible interference with my wheels or the frame or anything. If the suspension compresses on the outside, just very unlikely, but just want to prevent any of that. And then the front bolts are easy to get into, so I did the front one on this side and the front one on this side. The rears were a bit tougher because of the sway bar and the angle and everything. It's kind of wedged more on the more rear bolts. So what I did is I got it in place as close as I could. I was, you know, gonna pry against it, but I didn't want to scratch it. I was kind of hitting it with my hand. But what really worked is this towel on this jack stand, and I jacked up under different points of the sway bar a little bit. I did the middle and I got the right side, and then I did the left side of the sway bar and was able to get the left bolt in. So I kind of just held pressure on the bolt while I jacked it up, and then as it aligned, it slipped in place, and that was it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna torque those down to 45 foot-pounds. That's what it calls for in the instructions. And then I'm gonna try and kick it so that it's as far forward as I can get it, because I do want to prevent any interference with the coilover brackets, so I am going to slide it as far forward as possible, and then I'm going to torque it down to 45 foot-pounds and let the car down so we can get to the rest of this. Alright, so I got the sway bar torqued down, and I'm jacking the car up at the differential now to let it off the jacks. And one thing I wanted to check while I have it compressed is that if I lower the car to an extreme amount, how does that interfere with my fuel lines? And I can see that I do have one that does rub, so I'll need to pull that away with a clamp into the trunk floor pan. So there is just one line here that is going to be rubbing. It's not getting pinched or anything, but I think the rubbing could wear through from all the up and down, just constant bouncing. So I will end up moving that out of the way. The other thing that I'm checking is my fuel filter regulator. Is that going to make any contact? And what I can see is that where I mounted it, I kind of mounted it in a good location to where it's between the ears on the rear end. So it's actually, a good 3-4 fingers or a full hand away from the differential housing, but also it's not coming close to the ears or the upper control arm. So I'm pretty good on that piece. On my 69 Chevelle rear suspension, a couple things I wanted to point out. I have it at pretty low setting. That's not where I'm going to keep it, but that's just where I had it for adjustments right now so I can bolt things on. My fuel line here is going to have to be clipped or clamped up against the trunk body because it will just keep rubbing and cause a problem later. My fuel filter and regulator are between the two ears on the housing, so I don't actually have to move it. It's about a whole hand, like 5 fingers from touching the rear end. And it's between the ears, so there's no contact gonna be made on that side. And my wheel tuck is really close, so I'm gonna have to keep an eye on that and potentially roll fender on a painted car.
Alright guys, thanks for watching through that video. I hope it helped. Take it easy and good luck on your builds.